Sunlight sliced through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across my bedroom as I wrestled with the summer dress. My fingers, usually nimble, felt like clumsy thumbs as I fumbled with the tiny straps, my mind miles away, still picturing the dinner table I'd just set. He was out back, wrestling with the overgrown ivy on the pergola, a task he'd taken on without a word from me. Another sigh escaped as I tugged at a strap, adjusting my bra underneath. Then, disaster. The knot securing the other strap gave way. The dress slipped. For a heartbeat, I froze, staring at my reflection in disbelief as the fabric pooled at my waist, leaving me in nothing but lace and the sun's glow. Just as my fingers grasped for the dress, a soft knock echoed from the doorway. "Dinner smells incredible, Sarah. You need a..." I whirled around, clutching the dress to my chest. David, my stepson. He stood framed in the doorway, his gaze snagging on me for a fraction too long before snapping away. "I am so sorry," he stammered, his voice tight, like he'd forgotten how to breathe. "Didn't mean to. The door must have been ajar." "It's fine." I cut him off, the heat stinging my cheeks, belying my calm tone. He nodded jerkily, backing away as if the air between us had thickened, become charged. His eyes flickered up, met mine once, then he vanished down the hall. I stood there, dress clutched tight, staring at the empty doorway, my heart hammering a rhythm that felt both alien and achingly familiar. 52. A widow for 5 years. Rattling around in this sprawling house in Westchester County that felt too big, too silent for just me. Robert, my late husband, had left me everything. Comfort, security, the kind of life people envied. But he'd also left me with a gaping hole, an emptiness that echoed in every room, in every mundane chore. Then there was David, Robert's son from his first marriage, 27 now, tall, with a quiet confidence that could be both endearing and infuriating. When Robert died, David had insisted on staying in my life. "Family doesn't just end," he'd said at the funeral, his hand warm over mine, his grief mirroring my own. Over the years, he'd become a lifeline in ways I hadn't foreseen. He was there for the things Robert used to handle, fixing the storm door, clearing the gutters choked with fall leaves, hauling boxes down to the basement storage. We'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm, his presence a balm for the loneliness I fought so hard to conceal. But lately something had shifted. It was in the way his eyes lingered a beat too long when I handed him a glass of iced tea, the way he stood a little too close when we looked through Robert's old photo albums. I'd tried to dismiss it, chalk it up to a lonely widow's imagination, the way grief played tricks on a heart starved for connection. But after what just happened, after the hitch in his voice, the flush on his cheeks, I wasn't so sure anymore. That night at dinner, the air crackled with something unspoken. He sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, tanned forearms resting casually on the edge of the table as he complimented the roast chicken. I smiled, nodding at his words, but my mind was a whirlwind. All I could see was the doorway, the widening of his eyes, the quick averted gaze like he'd glimpsed something forbidden, something he wanted to see more of but knew he shouldn't. The thing was, I wasn't angry. Shouldn't I have been? Outraged? Mortified? Something closer to the indignation a woman in my position was supposed to feel? Instead, there was just a strange, unwelcome heat coiling low in my chest, spreading to places I hadn't acknowledged in years. Sipping my wine, I caught him glancing at me, his eyes dropping to his plate the second I met his gaze. For the first time, it wasn't just me noticing him, it was him noticing me. After dinner, he offered to do the dishes. I watched him from the living room, the steady rhythm of water and clinking plates a strangely hypnotic sound. His broad shoulders moved under his t-shirt as he leaned over the sink, and for a moment I lost myself. I forgot I was the woman who'd helped raise him. I forgot the decades that separated us. I forgot this was wrong. When he turned off the faucet and looked over, a soft smile playing on his lips, my heart stuttered. I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. The next morning, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen. I stood at the counter, pouring a cup into my favorite ceramic mug, when the back door creaked open. David. Early. The clock hadn't even struck 9, and the morning sun was still soft, golden, stretching across the hardwood floor. "Morning," he called out, his voice a little rough, the timbre of someone just waking up. I glanced over my shoulder. He stood in the doorway, hair tousled, t-shirt snug across his chest, a toolbox in hand. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady, even though my pulse had quickened. "You're here early." "Figured I'd get a jump on that back fence before it gets too hot," he said, stepping inside, his presence filling the room. The faint scent of earth and pine clung to him. "Coffee?" I asked, holding up the pot. He smiled, that lopsided grin that always seemed to disarm me. "Black, please." As I handed him the mug, his fingers brushed mine, just for a second, but long enough to send a jolt of awareness through me. I looked up, and our eyes met. Fleeting, but the moment lingered, charged in the air between us. The day unfolded in fragments of moments like that. Later, watching him from the porch as he hammered nails into the fence, I found myself studying him. His broad shoulders, the way his muscles flexed with each swing, a streak of sweat glistening at his temple. I scolded myself for looking, for letting my mind wander where it shouldn't. But it was hard to ignore the raw energy of him, the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from him. At one point, he glanced back, caught me staring. I quickly turned away, pretending to adjust the hem of my sundress, but my heart hammered against my ribs. When he finished, I brought out a pitcher of lemonade. He sat on the porch steps, his shirt damp and clinging to his skin, and I joined him, handing him a glass. "Looks like you fixed it," I said, nodding towards the fence. "Only because I had such a good excuse to come over," he replied, his tone playful, but his eyes searched mine. I laughed softly, but his words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed every interaction of the day, his voice, his smile, the way his eyes had lingered. Too vivid, too real to ignore. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, all in my head. But deep down, I knew better. A few days later, he showed up unannounced. "Thought I'd take a look at the deck," he said, standing on the porch with that familiar toolbox. The deck was fine. I knew it, and I was pretty sure he did too. But I stepped aside, letting him in. As he worked, I brought out a tray of iced tea. The summer heat was oppressive, the cool drink a welcome relief. "Thanks," he said, taking a long sip, then leaned against the railing, his gaze drifting to me. "You know," he began, his voice low, "I think this is the first summer I've really spent time here with you. I mean, really spent time." I smiled, a warmth blooming in my chest. "I'm glad you're here, David. I really am." His eyes softened. For a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Over the next few weeks, his visits became more frequent. He found reasons to be around. Fixing a squeaky door hinge, replacing a burnt-out light bulb, trimming the overgrown hedges in the front garden. Each time, our conversations deepened, became more personal. He told me about his childhood, how he used to resent his father for remarrying so quickly after his mother left. But then he smiled, looking at me. "It didn't take long for me to realize how lucky he was to have found you." His words caught me off guard. For a moment, I was speechless. Then he reached out, his hand brushing mine, and everything else seemed to fade away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we sat together on the porch swing, a bottle of wine between us. The conversation was light at first, memories of Robert, stories of David's college days in the city. But as the wine flowed, so did the words we'd both been holding back. "I never told you this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But after Dad passed, I didn't just come around to help you. I came because I needed to be here, with you." His confession hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. My breath hitched. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "David," I began, but he shook his head, cutting me off. "I know it's wrong," he said, his eyes searching mine. "I know how this looks, but I can't ignore what I feel." The turning point came on a rainy afternoon. He'd come over with a new garden hose, but the weather had turned suddenly, trapping us indoors. Rain lashed against the windows, the gray light casting long shadows across the living room. We sat on the couch, a movie flickering softly on the TV, neither of us paying attention. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking the silence. "About what?" I asked, my voice quieter than intended. "About us." My heart skipped a beat. "David, we can't," I started, but he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. "Why not?" he asked, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. "We're not hurting anyone. It's just us, here, in this moment. Why can't we have that?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to argue, to push him away, but the truth was I couldn't, because deep down, I wanted it too. Before I could speak, he leaned in, his hand cupping my face, his lips brushing against mine. Soft at first, tentative, as if waiting for me to pull away, but I didn't. The kiss deepened, and for a moment the world dissolved. No rain, no judgment, no past, no future. Only us. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my skin. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't help myself." I shook my head, my hands trembling as they rested against his chest. "Don't be." We sat there for a long time, the rain continuing its relentless assault on the world outside. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was thick with an understanding that needed no words. By the time the rain stopped, something between us had irrevocably shifted. There was no going back now. The next evening, David came over again, unannounced. Unusual, even for him. I'd barely begun to process the previous day, and seeing him on the porch, a determined look in his eyes, made my pulse race. "I needed to see you," he said simply, his voice steady, yet edged with something raw. I hesitated, my hand lingering on the doorframe. "David, maybe we should talk about—" He stepped closer, closing the space between us. "We've been talking, haven't we? For weeks, for months, and I think we both know where this is going." I wanted to argue, to push him away, to tell him this was wrong. But as I stood there, his words hung in the air, undeniable, heavy with truth. "Let me in," he said softly, his tone not commanding, but pleading. And I found myself stepping aside, letting him in, not just through the door, but into the guarded corners of my heart I'd tried to keep locked away. We ended up in the living room, the room that once felt so large and empty, now seeming intimate, smaller, the air thick with unspoken tension. He sat on the edge of the couch, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "I know this isn't easy for you," he began, his voice low. "But I can't keep pretending what I feel isn't real. And I don't think you can either." "David," I whispered, but the words caught in my throat. He stood, closing the distance. His hand reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. The gesture was so tender, so intimate, it left me breathless. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice barely audible. Before I could stop myself, I leaned into his touch. And then, just like that, the dam broke. His lips met mine in a kiss that was anything but hesitant. It was slow, deliberate, full of everything we'd left unsaid. His hands rested lightly on my hips, not demanding, but holding me in place, as if afraid I might vanish if he let go. When we broke apart, my breath came in shallow gasps, my mind reeling with every reason this was a mistake. But then I looked into his eyes, soft, earnest, brimming with a kind of emotion I hadn't seen in years. "I don't want to stop," he said, his voice steady, and neither did I. We moved to the couch, the world outside fading away. The hum of the air conditioner and the occasional creak of the floorboards were the only sounds. He kissed me again, deeper this time, his hand sliding up my arm, his touch igniting a warmth that spread through me like wildfire. I broke the kiss, my forehead resting against his. "This is crazy," I whispered. "Maybe," he replied, his fingers tracing slow, deliberate patterns on my back, "but it feels right." There was no denying it. It did feel right. Too right. His hands moved lower, gripping my waist, pulling me closer. I let out a soft gasp, my body betraying the caution my mind tried to impose. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my fingertips. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice strained, his eyes searching mine. I couldn't. Instead, I leaned in, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that was both an answer and a surrender. The next moments blurred together. The soft brush of his fingertips against my skin, the way his lips found every place that made me shiver, the quiet whispers of reassurance exchanged in the dim light. It all felt surreal, like a dream I never wanted to wake from. Time seemed to slow as we surrendered to the pull that had been building for so long. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word felt like a piece of a puzzle finally falling into place. When it was over, we lay together on the couch, the room bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, his arm draped loosely around my waist, my head resting against his chest, listening to the steady rise and fall of his breath. "I don't regret this," he said quietly, breaking the silence. I looked up at him, my heart aching with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "Neither do I admitted, the words feeling both liberating and terrifying. But as the quiet settled around us, reality began to creep back in. What we had done couldn't be undone. And while it had felt right in the moment, I couldn't ignore the questions swirling in my mind. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He tightened his hold, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my hip. "We figure it out. Together." His confidence was reassuring, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Boundaries had been crossed, lines erased, But for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long golden streaks across the living room floor. I sat on the edge of the couch, still wrapped in the blanket he'd pulled over me during the night. The room was silent now, save for the faint chirping of birds outside, but my mind was anything but quiet. David was gone. He'd left before sunrise, pressing a lingering kiss to my forehead and promising we'd talk soon. I watched him walk out the door, his figure dissolving into the soft haze of dawn. And with him went the temporary euphoria of the night before. Now, in the stark light of day, reality loomed, large and unrelenting. I traced my fingers over the curve of the mug in my hands, the coffee inside growing cold. My thoughts were a tangled mess, swinging wildly between the tenderness of his touch and the weight of what we'd done. I had crossed a line I'd spent years trying to define and respect, and yet I couldn't bring myself to regret it. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I had felt truly seen, truly wanted. David had looked at me not as someone he was obligated to care for, but as a woman. A woman with desires, fears, and longings that had been buried under layers of grief and routine. But what now? The question hung over me like a shadow, its answer as elusive as sleep had been the night before. I couldn't ignore the implications. The whispers of self-doubt and judgment gnawed at the edges of my mind. I thought of the life Robert and I had built, the memories that still lived in every corner of this house in Westchester. What would he think of me now? And David, what would this mean for him? For us? I placed the mug down on the coffee table, my hands trembling. The path forward wasn't clear, but one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same. A week crawled by before I saw David again. I'd spent those days oscillating between fleeting moments of clarity and crushing waves of doubt. I kept busy, gardening, reorganizing the attic, even repainting the guest bedroom a shade of pale blue, anything to keep my mind from drifting back to that night. But no amount of distraction could erase the memory of his touch, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the way his voice had softened when he said my name. When he finally showed up on the porch that Saturday morning, my heart leaped and sank all at once. He looked different, calmer, more assured, but there was a tension in his shoulders that betrayed the weight of whatever he'd come to say. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me," he admitted, standing there, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I gestured for him to come in, my voice steadier than I felt. "Of course I want to see you." He stepped inside. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "I've thought about that night, about us. Every day since it happened," he said, his words careful but firm. "I know it's complicated, and I know it's not what anyone would expect. But I can't ignore how I feel about you. I don't want to." His honesty took my breath away. I'd spent so much time second-guessing myself, imagining every possible consequence that I hadn't allowed myself to truly consider what it would mean to embrace this, to embrace him. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "So am I," he replied, stepping closer. "But I'd rather be scared with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." His words hung in the air. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. As I walked him to the door later, he paused, his hand resting on the doorknob. "Come with me," he said suddenly, turning to face me. "Come with you where?" I asked, startled. "Anywhere," he said simply, his eyes holding mine. "Just let's leave all this behind. Start fresh, together." I hesitated, my mind racing with questions and doubts. But when I looked at him, standing there with hope in his eyes and a quiet resolve in his voice, I felt the tiniest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my lips curving into a small, uncertain smile. And as he walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter I hadn't even dared to dream of.